Hello and welcome to Kabbalah in the Afternoon with Rabbi Phil. I'm your host, Rabbi Phil. Today we'll be reading from Gershon Hanoch of Radzin's Introduction to Everything. It's the modern guide for the perplexed. We're going to start with the second part, which goes a little bit like this. Rabbi Gershon Hanoch of Radzin lived about 150 years ago, passed away 125 years ago, and give or take a year. And he was credited as the one who first discovered the tchelet, the blue dye used in biblical for the temple and for the vestments of the high priest and for the talit, the tzitzit on the talit, fringes. Though his tchelet, his sky blue dye, is contested as the exact same kind of tchelet used in temple times, he is completely recognized as the one who first brought it back and started the true search for the tchelet. Whether he would accept the modern versions of tchelet or not we can only think about what might have been. There's no proof for such a thing. So the second part is the entrance to the gate of the Beit Yaakov. In the first chapter, Rav Gershon Hanoch discusses the interrelationship of faith, fear of God, and the Torah. Faith, he explains, underlies the fear of God, while the fear of God provides a setting for one's faith. On the simplest level, this means that belief in God leads us to fear Him, which motivates a person to observe the Torah's commandments. Seen from a different perspective, the fear of God delineates a person's actions and helps him express his faith. However, the fear that the author posits here is not mere fear of divine punishment or retribution, whether in this world or the next, which the Zohar defines as a lower kind of fear. Rather, it is a fear born of an intense awareness of God's absolute transcendence. Thus, it would more accurately be called an awareness or an awe of divinity. The Zohar identifies this as a higher kind of fear. This awareness is the first step towards the higher goal of enlightenment. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. This is the verse in the Psalms. This consciousness, called the fear of God, is the vessel a person needs to receive the Torah. As it is written, the fear of God is his storehouse. And as the first part of this verse says, he shall be a stability of the times. Nevertheless, says the Talmud, without the fear of God as a storehouse, one has nothing. What does it mean to receive the Torah? On a simple level, receiving the Torah means to observe the commandments. But on a deeper level, it means perceiving the very root of the Torah, which is the revelation of God. So the fear of God holds and stores something, in this case, the Torah. So the verse in Isaiah says, "He shall be the stability of the times, a store of salvation, wisdom and knowledge. The fear of God is his storehouse." The Babylonian Talmud regards each of the attributes hinting to another order of the Mishnah. So stability regards to faith, and that has to do with the tractate of Zra'im, seeds, about the agricultural laws. Your times, in the verse, stability of your times, refers to Moed, or the festivals. Strength refers to Nashim, the order of the laws about women. The salvation refers to nizikim, or damages, all kinds of laws of damages, saving us from any kind of harm or damage. Wisdom has to do with kodshim, holy things, meaning the laws of the sacrifices in the temple. And knowledge, taharot, has to do with the laws of purity. The order of Zra'im deals with the laws of planting, harvesting, tithes, etc. So it's alluded at in the word emunah, meaning both faith and stability. In Hebrew, emunah means faith. It also means stability. So Isaiah said, "You shall be emunat itecha," the stability of your times. That is to say, a person with faith goes ahead and plants a seed and sows his seeds in the field because he believes that it'll grow. There's a deeper relationship between the use of these two words as well. In Judaism, in general, faith is not necessarily an abstract feeling or concept, but a level of stability and unwavering commitment in the sense of faithfulness. The Radzina Rebbe continues, and he says that the first consideration is faith, which is rooted in the fear of God, whereas the fear of God is the vessel which holds faith. But what kind of faith are we talking about? It is the kind where a person believes that God is all-powerful and exalted. On this, the Zohar, the Holy Zohar, writes, "In the beginning God created. This is the first commandment, which is called the fear of God. The fear of God is called the beginning. As it is written, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God." The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. It is the gate one must enter in order to arrive at faith. In this way, the whole world depends on this commandment. The reader may notice a contradiction in what I've just said, or the listener. Above, Rav Gershon Hanoch stated that faith precedes the fear of God. First you need faith, and then you can have the fear of God. Here, the Zohar says that the fear of God precedes faith. First you fear God, and then you have faith in God. As will become clear below, there are two types of faith. There's a deep inner certainty of God's existence, which leads to fear and the awe of Him. And there's a higher type of faith which actually transcends the limited intellect and duality of this world, which is the result of this type of fear. There are three aspects in the fear of God. The first two lack a correct foundation, while the third one has a correct foundation. The first kind is when a person fears God in order not to have harm brought upon his children, or in order not to personally suffer physical retribution or financial loss. He fears God constantly for these reasons, yet his fear lacks a foundation. The second kind is when a person fears God in order not to suffer punishment in the world to come or in hell. These two kinds of fear are not true expressions of the fear of God. The third and true expression is when a person fears God solely because He is the great and sovereign ruler of the universe, the root and source of all the worlds, and that everything is considered as nothing before Him. As it is written in the book of Daniel, all the inhabitants of the world is considered as naught before Him. He should place all of his desire on this place which is called fear. That's the end of the quote from the Zohar. Now, Rabbi Gershon Hanoch continues and explains. This passage from the Zohar discusses the highest level of the fear of God, which is the third mentioned above. But it also says that the fear of God is the beginning and the gateway. So again, what's the highest level of the fear of God? To fear God purely because He is the great and sovereign ruler of the universe, knowing that everything is in His hands and everything is nothing before Him. So that is the highest form, but it also says that the fear of God is the beginning and the gateway. For one who does not attain this fundamental level of the fear of God, must still make supreme efforts in the development of lower levels of fear until he attains it. For the highest level can only be attained after earnest inner work and striving. The Tikkun Zohar also enumerates the levels of the fear of God from below to above. In the Zohar's discussion of the 10 levels, he says the following. There is fear and there is a higher fear. This is the Zohar. There is fear and there is a higher fear. Not all expressions of fear are equal. One person's fear of God may largely be motivated by the fear of divine punishment. Of this it is taught in the Pirkei Avot, an unlearned person cannot fear sin. A person ignorant of the Torah does not have the basic information to know what to fear. A higher level is one who fears God based on his knowledge of the Torah, which is called Tiferet, or splendor. This kind of fear is equal to the Torah itself. For this reason, not all forms of fear of God are the same. Thus, fear of the Lord is God's own sovereignty and contains within it all the commandments of the Torah, since it is actually coming from the Torah itself, which is called the middle column, which is the name Havaya, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the Tetragrammaton. Because of this, the authors of the Mishnah taught us, great is the Torah in that it brings man to action. If man does not know the Torah, or the reward and punishment for keeping or transgressing its commandments, or the one who created or knowing the one who created the Torah and gives it to Israel, how can he then fear God and guard his commandments? For this reason, King David said to his son, King Solomon, know the God of your fathers and serve him. First know the God of your fathers, and then you can serve him. For if one does not know the one who gave him the Torah and commanded him to guard it, how can he then fear him and fulfill his commandments? This has been a reading from the English translation of the Hakdama Beit Yaakov by Rabbi Gershon Hanoch of Radzin. I'm your host, Bezalel Edwards, and have a pleasant day. God bless.